is wrong. You have the human act of human act of love or of sex, and the end product of that is the mutual help and consolation it gives to the partners, and then following naturally, any result from that, such as a birth, is part of the natural complete act. So
people in our group answered to these questions one by one, and one American delegate said that if the patient, Mrs. X is unimpaired, she has the right to decide. And if she were Mrs. X, she preferred to die naturally. He also said that he wouldn't live on a life support machine. If he could move around, even though with a life support machine, he would prefer to be live. But he said he wouldn't be happy if he had to live. If he had to lie down on a bed and he cannot move around at all.
It doesn't the consensus between Japanese delegates, so please keep in mind. And as a first question, who has the right to decide? I think we think the mother should have the right to decide, but she must consult with doctor and lawyer in advance. That's the answer to the first question. And then second question. Before that, I must say the reason why I add lawyer into consideration. In Japan, usually such kind of decision will be made between some families and doctors, and it is very rare in the lawyer will be put into the decision. But I think this kind is very delicate case. So, she might be a murderer by this decision. So, to avoid such tragedy, I suggest the lawyer should be put into the discussion.
They don't know what it's like to carry and bear children. And that even though the man should take a more active part in the feelings and discussion of the issue, that the final decision should be the woman's, because it's her body.
The members of our group took on the roles of different people who would be involved in this situation. And because of that, each of them got to contribute to shaping the exact nature of what was happening. So, for example, our girl, Erica, she was on scholarship, but she had good grades. She was career-oriented. Now, this situation occurs in Japan in different perspectives. Oh, Hiro was on that. We went through and considered the different perspectives. For me personally, the most touching conversation that occurred was one between Erica and the fetus. We had one person play out the child. And in this, Erica says to the child, well, do you want to live? And the child says, yes, I want to live. Then she says to the child, I am a career-oriented woman. And the response is, but mommy, I'm a career-oriented child. And another thing that the child mentioned was that, mommy, you really don't know. See me, give me a chance. See who I am. Give me a chance. The legal side, of course, this was Japan. We didn't think it was too realistic that the father would go to court. He did have a friend who was a lawyer, and that friend advised him that in this case, legally at least, none of the four conditions were met. Erica really had no support nobody really supported the decision actively outside of her sister and to some extent the professor, although the professor was, well, you decide, I'm really not sure, you know, was not really like that, but really didn't have a strong standing in the way, it was more neutral.
Discussion, and I guess we can still more time. We still have more time to discuss about bioethics, even tonight or tomorrow night. But even during the men-women symposium. And this is the end of the bioethics symposium. But before we go up to the dining room for the dinner, Anne will give us an announcement for the party.
And walk outside, and women are in the home. And this is social structure. And the social structure has been successful until now. And you can see this proof in the Japanese economic growth. But I'm not sure this social structure will continue from now on, because those women, those want to have their career increasing year by year. So the change in our society will be needed in the future, I think. And during the discussion, we Japanese men were asked by the American women, what kind of husband or what kind of father do you want to be in the future? And someone said that during the experience of the camp, he wanted to cook. And we don't have much time to talk about the American men and women's problem. So you can talk.
Each discussion group will have a facilitator, and I'd like to mention a couple of points before we start. One is that we just request that you be considerate of the schedule and please talk
to 80 years old, men for 70, 80 years old, and women for 80 years old, which is the longest life expectancy in the world. And most Japanese women have 2 or 3 children. Most of them average is 1.7 children. That gives them a lot of time to live without children, having their children, but they go to school, so they have their own time. More than 35 or 40 years after they're taking care of children. It didn't happen like this way 30 years ago when the Second World War ended. The life expectancy at the time in 1945 was around 55 or 50 years old to 55, less than 60 years old. And they had 4 or 5 children. That makes only 4 or 5 years to live without children or taking care of family for women, but not these days. 35 or 40 years are left for women. They have to live hard. Here is the registration office. Here's your handicapped. Just people getting to the desk and make a line from all over the world, and many of them do not understand English.
Our topic in the group is employment, and it's certainly everybody's concern because we are all students. End of our conversation, we stop our discussion on this point, and we didn't have any conclusion. But what we said was, suppose we are working in a company where more than half of employees are women. And how would you feel at that point? And I want you, all of us, to think and imagine to be in this situation. And that place is not man-dominated, and more women are here as a manager, as the executives too. And what would you do in this kind of situation? And what have to be changed to have this kind of situation? Thank you.
My group was sexuality group number 1. And first of all, we asked a question and everyone answered one by one. The question was, do you agree or disagree to premarital sex and why? And some said they definitely disagree, and some said agree. They think those who agree said that they don't see anything wrong with it. And they said it is a good part, nice part, important part of man-woman relationship.
Even when you work against it. We also question what is natural and what is socially or politically constructed in notions of masculine and feminine. And this came up because one of the delegates said that sometimes it's known that since women have different bodies than men, then maybe they have different capabilities. And I pointed out that in the early 19th century in the United States, it was a common belief that women actually had such small brains that they definitely could not do what men do, but that most people don't believe that anymore. So we try to examine what is nature and what is considered natural and what is socially constructed. And we determined that if masculinity and femininity are social or political constructions, then indeed they can change as a society changes.
I think it's always interesting to get right down on a personal level and hear about people's own experiences and not what they think the society should be like, but hear how they grew up and what they plan to do in the future. That was about it. Again, it often gravitated towards family structures and the importance of that. And just as my own personal observation, I find it very interesting that what the Japanese delegates expressed and what many of the American delegates expressed in terms of family structures that they hope to have in the future, both in the discussions this morning and this afternoon, were not all that different, which I found really fascinating, considering the difference in family structures that exist today.
At night, then they do not really have much chances to meet any women. And also married couples often have to live with their husband's parents. So if the mother of the husband and their wife does not have really good relationship, then it can cause so many troubles between inside the family. So
differences between Japanese families and American families. And one of the differences was that the concept of the family was a bit different in that in Japan.
One aspect of this involves the whole issue of men and women, and that the problems that we face as people, and not as men, and not as women necessarily. Some analogies that might help are the issue of a gaijin in Japan that I would like to compare to the feelings of being a woman in the world and being a man in the world. Now, some things that I've noticed throughout my work with the Men and Women Symposium should do this and women should do this and men should do that, and it's all very theoretical and it sounds good. But when you ask them about their own family, it changes. Oh, well, no, that's fine for other people, but I don't want my wife to work. And another reversal of that is, well, I will do in my life what I want, but I won't try to change other people's minds. There has to be a balance between both aspects where you are changing society from within, and as a member of society, which every one of you and me are. I noticed something during the prep session that's very important. There was a feeling of urgency, a feeling of almost a desperate feeling during the women's discussions
This was not present during the men's discussions. Some of this is reflected in what was just said about the man who said, well, I want to be on top. Women who do face more problems, perhaps in different ways than men, because they are not in the powerful situations, are going to continue to have pleas and to continue to have problems. And if you think that simply 3 days of a conference or whatever, let them get them out, let them make these comments, and then they will stop and it will go away, that's not what's going to happen. They're only going to get louder, and you're going to have to listen to them, and the world is going to have to listen. And I was definitely a little bit disturbed by that. But then I thought that the criticism that was made of the symposium prep session was good, because we'd obviously made people think and reevaluate questions that they'd never thought of. So we asked questions during that time that perhaps no one had asked. We asked Japanese men how often they saw their fathers. And some answers were less than a few hours a week as they grew up. No one had asked them these questions before. But what we hoped that we did was begin to get them to think and ask themselves, and for the women to ask themselves the same questions. Change, which must come about if people do wish to lead satisfying lives, is very scary and it's very risky. As Chris brought up in our session, were women not, I have no other choice. So if you are to leave the symposium and forget about it as an exercise that we did during jazz, and gee, it was nice to hear the women, for instance, who might have sounded outspoken, say what they had to say, but now we don't get to hear it anymore, then I guess I feel very sorry. But if you go away from the symposium and you sit down and you reevaluate your life, and you reevaluate the decisions you made, perhaps then you've learned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Today is a Men and Women Symposium, and it's also my birthday. I don't know why it's a combination, but but I'm really happy. So thank you very much.
At first, today, 14th August, always it is summer vacation, you know? So always I was celebrated by my parents and my sister and also my close friend only. So today I'm very happy to celebrate with many friends. Thank you very much.
primary product export. But we have to remember the reason why silk was such a good export was because there was a silk flight in Europe, and there were no other sources of silk in the world. So Japan essentially had monopoly power over silk production. And I'm not certain what happened with tea, but Japan quickly banned it. I mean, quickly, within 15 years, they pretty much moved their exports to light industry. And so the argument that this man was making, that these countries should invest in primary exports in agricultural products is ludicrous. Those countries were very poor, and by combining and organizing into the OPEC cartel, they were able to force the Western world to pay more money for oil, and now they're very wealthy nations compared to the way they were before. And it's, upset the Western economic order a great deal. And this is the only kind of power they could really exert, was to combine their forces because they controlled the necessary resource. Now, I was wondering what people felt about the Third World doing the same thing with, say, bauxite or with tin or other natural resources over which they have a certain amount of control.
Third world countries, if they come together, can exert more power. But what we have to understand when we talk about the third world is it's a very heterogeneous group of nations. There are countries that are at different stages of development. There are countries like Brazil and Mexico and India that are at the very top of the developing world, and other countries like Bangladesh that are very low. So it's a very heterogeneous group. So let's take, for example, the movie mentioned, the Andean Pact. The movie is quite outdated because the Andean Pact, which was a group of Latin American countries.
Most economists will say that any cartel will fail in the long run, and as you see with OPEC now, they're having very difficult problems. So, personally, and also from kind of an economics consensus point, these cartels aren't an effective way to solve any problem, because in the short run you may increase the amount of revenue you get, but in the long run countries will develop substitutes and alternate supplies that will ultimately undermine your effort to bring more stability and more revenue to your countries.
How is money funneled into these countries? In other words, is the money given to lawmakers, or does it go to the central government, which might just end up buying tanks anyway? Tanks and armaments instead of, let's say, agriculture development projects.
Don't we have one of the ones with a little
Excuse me.
How, even if, well, you said money is generated by the selling of primary goods, and in some cases, it's governments that sell the primary goods. So how could you keep tabs on where the money is going once it goes into the individual country, be it through the